Good morning, Asia. Good evening, America. You're watching World DNA with me, Jyotsna Kumar.
And I'm Hem Kaur Suraya, and on the show today, we will be tracking what is happening in West Asia. International and domestic pressure is mounting on the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, as US President Joe Biden has said that he was not doing enough to secure the release of all the hostages in Gaza. This after there's anger and uproar after the recovery of 6 bodies of captives. This while Biden also met US negotiators working alongside Qatar and Egypt to try and secure a truce deal. What happens going forward? That is something we'll explore on the show today.
Also on the show today, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi will depart on his official visits to Brunei and Singapore today. In the first leg of his trip, Prime Minister Modi is visiting Brunei at the invitation of Sultan Haji Hassanal Bolkiah to strengthen bilateral cooperation between the two countries. We'll get you more on that, but first the headlines.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israeli forces must retain control over the Philadelphia corridor on the Gaza-Egypt border. Vows not to give in to pressure over the issue in ceasefire talks.
Thousands march across Israel for a third straight day to demand an immediate hostage release deal after bodies of 6 hostages recovered from Gaza.
President Joe Biden says Netanyahu is not doing enough to secure a deal for the release of hostages held in Gaza. Says the United States is close to presenting a final proposal to negotiators working on a hostage and ceasefire agreement.
Indian investigators arrest Sandeep Ghosh, ex-principal of Kolkata's RGCG Medical Hospital and College, weeks after the horrific rape and murder of a trainee doctor. 3 more arrested in case related to financial irregularities at the hospital.
Venezuela's Attorney General issues arrest warrant for opposition leader Edmundo Gonzalez, accuses him of incitement and other crimes amid dispute over the presidential election results.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to embark on a 3-day visit to Brunei and Singapore today, the first ever bilateral visit by an Indian Prime Minister to Brunei.
Brazilian Supreme Court unanimously upholds nationwide suspension of social media platform X. Judges vote to extend blocking of Elon Musk's own platform.
"39-year-old Cristiano Ronaldo refutes international retirement talks." The Portugal captain says that the thought of hanging the boots never crossed his mind. The Labour-led government in the United Kingdom has announced that it is partially suspending arms exports to Israel, citing a clear risk that the use of British weapons in Gaza could have breached international humanitarian law.
Now, during a parliamentary session on Monday, Foreign Minister David Lammy said that the country will suspend 30 out of 350 export licenses to Israel over concerns about Israel's conduct in the Gaza Strip. However, Lamy clarified that it is not an arms embargo and the ban does not include suspending exports of parts of F-35 stealth fighter jets.
It is with regret that I inform the House today the assessment I have received leaves me unable to conclude anything other than that for certain UK arms exports to Israel, there does exist a clear risk that they might be used to commit or facilitate a serious violation of international humanitarian law. I have informed my right honourable friend, the Business and Trade Secretary, and he is therefore today announcing the suspension of around 30 from a total of approximately 350 to Israel as required under the Export Controls Act.
Israeli Defense Minister has reacted to the development, saying that he is deeply disheartened by the arms export cuts. In the past few months, the UK government has faced legal action from rights groups for continuing with arms export to Israel.
Rights advocates have accused the UK government of ignoring its own licensing regulations, which states that weapons should not be exported when there is a clear risk that they could be used in international humanitarian law violations.
The Starmer-led Labour government's decision came on the heels of U.S. President Joe Biden saying that Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was not doing enough to secure hostage and ceasefire deal with Hamas.
Do you think he's doing enough? No.
U.S. President Joe Biden said on Monday that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was not doing enough to get a deal for the release of hostages held in Gaza by Hamas. Over the weekend, Israeli forces recovered the bodies of 6 hostages from a tunnel in Gaza. Among them, 23-year-old American-Israeli Hirsch Goldberg Polin. Israel's military said they had been killed recently by Palestinian Hamas militants. The developments have sparked criticism of the Biden administration's Gaza ceasefire strategy. Meanwhile, Israelis are also ramping up pressure on Netanyahu. Protesters took to the streets again on Monday, staying out late into the night in Tel Aviv.
The pressure internationally must be directed at these killers, at Hamas, not at Israel.
Netanyahu appeared to push back when asked about Biden's comments.
We're asked to make concessions? What message does this send Hamas? It says, kill more hostages, murder more hostages, you'll get more concessions.
A senior Hamas official said Biden's criticism was, quote, American recognition that Netanyahu was responsible for undermining efforts to reach a deal. Netanyahu has accused Hamas of obstructing any agreement. Months of stop-start negotiations mediated by the U.S., Qatar, and Egypt have so far failed to reach an accord on a proposal laid out by Biden in May. On Monday, he said the U.S. was close to presenting a final proposal to negotiators.
We're very close to that.
When asked if a deal would be successful, Biden said he was not giving up.
Hope springs eternal.
U.S. President Joe Biden says that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu isn't doing enough for a hostage deal as well as a ceasefire. Biden and other negotiators are hammering out what they call a final proposal. The U.S. is pushing for a deal, somewhat frustrated with the slow progress. 6 hostages were recovered in Gaza, including an Israeli American, after being executed by Hamas, fueling protests in Israel. For Netanyahu to bring hostages home, Biden vowed to hold Hamas leaders accountable. The U.S. is working now with Qatar and Egypt to secure a deal, but critics say Benjamin Netanyahu's demands have also derailed efforts. Netanyahu, for his part, says that he is indeed doing everything he can for a ceasefire deal. The conflict began after Hamas breached the Gaza border, killing 1,200 Israelis and abducting 251 others. Israel, for its part, has killed over 40,000 Palestinians in retaliatory attacks, according to the Palestinians. The U.S. response at this point has implications for the Biden administration, as well as the upcoming presidential election here in the United States. Susan Terhani reporting from New York for WION World as One.
All right, and for more on this, we're now being joined by Dr. Alan Bernstein from Boston. He is Professor of Political Science at Tufts University. Sir, thank you so much for joining us. Always a pleasure to have you. I want to start by asking you, of course, you know, pressure is growing on Israel, not just from within Israel, also now from its allies. But Netanyahu remains defiant that Israel must maintain its presence in the Philadelphia corridor. This 14-kilometer corridor, that has now become a sticking point in negotiations. Do you think Israel can remain defiant like this at a time when pressure is growing?
First of all, thank you for having me and good morning. You know, it really depends if we look at it from a security point of view for Israel or from a more political, some would say cynical point of view for Israel. From a security point of view, Israel has maintained that the Philadelphia line, this border between Gaza and Egypt, is the main pipeline through which Hamas has managed to arm itself over the years. And Israel, in theory, could remain defiant. You know, as long as the United States does not itself stop protecting Israel diplomatically or sending arms, Israel has the capability to remain defiant and say this is critical for our security and is a non-starter. Israel is not going to agree to withdraw. Then there's also the other side, which is the political side. Netanyahu's government is extremely vulnerable to very hawkish right-wing elements who have threatened to overthrow the government again and again if Israel ends up with some sort of ceasefire and withdrawing from the Gaza Strip. And I've said many times that all the actors in the war, including Hamas and when they decide to agree to ceasefire or not, including Israel, Hezbollah, also the United States, these actors are acting based upon their internal politics. Just like in the United States, there's pressure now to mount a deal, also leading up to the elections, as your corresponding reporter said. In Israel, it's internal political pressures that are also going to heavily govern how Netanyahu operates. That's just, unfortunately, how the game is played.
All right, Dr. Bernstein, that being said, what does it mean for Israel now? We know that, you know, they are at risk of losing support from its allies. UK has said that they're suspending some arms export, citing a clear risk. What does it mean for Israel now?
So Israel is vulnerable to a lot of pressures from its different allies. The United Kingdom is a staunch supporter of Israel, but really the two main ways in which Israel could be pressured if it was to actually change its position come from the United States. One is if the United States were to start limiting its exports of weapons to Israel. We saw the Biden administration implying that they might start to do this before Israel invaded Rafah. We're talking back in April, May. And Israel, there was a lot of tension about that. Then Prime Minister Netanyahu delayed the invasion of Rafah again and again because of that. Then there's also the U.S. veto power in the United Nations. Those are really the two things that offer Israel a lot of diplomatic umbrella support that allow it to sort of hold its ground in response to pressure, for example, from the United Kingdom or from the EU or from the UN. So the mounting pressure from the United Kingdom, just like there's also been weapons sort of embargoes from Canada and from other countries, is important. It is going to mount pressure on Israel. But at the end, what makes or breaks if Israel can withstand this pressure or not is can it still rely on the United States to offer it that diplomatic support and military support. Those are really the things that are going to determine if Israel can withstand the pressure or not.
Right, sir. Now, just to expand on that, we've heard U.S. President Joe Biden say that Netanyahu is not doing enough to secure a ceasefire deal. My question to you is, do you think the allies are doing enough to stop Israel? Are these limited bans on weapons exports and this verbal condemnation, do you think that's enough?
I mean, it's a very difficult question because on the one hand, the world supports Israel's right to defend itself, and Israel is still fighting an organization that is defined as a terror group by Israel, the UN, the EU, the United States. Hamas is defined as a terror group, and it is defined as part of the axis that's allied with Iran, and largely the Western world does support Israel's war against Hamas. At the same time, large elements within the quote-unquote Western world are very critical of the way Israel's going about that war in the Gaza Strip. So the pressuring countries are a little bit in a bind. They want to support Israel because they feel that that is more the side of history they want to be on, the side that fights Hamas. However, the mounting Palestinian casualties and civilians really limits the way they can fight or they can pressure Israel. And that is why we're seeing all kinds of roundabout pressures other than a direct weapons embargo or a direct declaring that Israel is a pariah state or things like that. What we have seen is different states that care a little bit less about how they are seen in their relationship with Israel, like South Africa, like Turkey. These are the states that approach the International Court of Justice, the ICC, the ones that say, you know what, we don't care if it looks in history like we're on that side or that side. We want to pressure Israel as much as we can. So we're seeing that from those states. From the Western allies, the EU, the UK, and the United States, we're unlikely to see like a full-on pressure of Israel at any point, at any time soon.
Dr. Bernstein, then what does it mean now for the ceasefire deal and the situation in Gaza? Netanyahu has said that he will go on, he will avenge for the killing of the hostages. Where does the ceasefire deal stand now then?
So I would not take Netanyahu's statements that he's going to avenge the death of the hostages too seriously. If Netanyahu could mount more military pressure on Hamas than he has already, he would have done that. He doesn't need an excuse to all of a sudden now he'll mount more military pressure against Hamas. Netanyahu has been trying to destroy Hamas, annihilate, capture Yahya Sinwar. So I don't see the war actually taking any different turn because of the execution of these 6 hostages. At the end of the day, it is going to matter how much external pressure and internal pressure comes on the Israeli government and on Hamas. Hamas, between May and July, was the defiant one. It refused to accept the deal that Biden proposed. Then in July, Hamas all of a sudden was more susceptible and agreed to certain terms of the deal. Then Israel became the one that all of a sudden was starting to say, okay, well then we have more terms. So really it's about the right moment in which both sides are pressured. And a lot of this has to do with internal pressure. You know, you mentioned that in Israel there's an uproar of protesters. This could be a major protest wave. You know, if we remember a year ago, there were massive protests of hundreds of thousands of people in the streets of Israel. The society there does tend to protest when it's really up in arms. So it could be that internal pressure would lead to this. Otherwise, right now, it's just a stalemate. Israel has placed new terms on the deal. Hamas has said, we're not going to accept them. The United States, Qatar, and Egypt are all going to apply their pressure. But unless something breaks internally, unfortunately, it's a bit of a stalemate at the moment.
All right, Dr. Bernstein, thank you so much for joining us and giving your insights on the show.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Well, that being said, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said that he will continue to insist on maintaining an Israeli presence along the Philadelphia corridor. That's a narrow band along Gaza's border with Egypt.
Absolutely. This as Israel witnesses massive protests after the bodies of 6 hostages were recovered from a tunnel in the city of Rafah. They are demanding Netanyahu to do more to bring home the remaining 101 hostages.
Now, in his first address since the protests began, Netanyahu addressed the sticking point between Israel and Hamas. That's the 14-kilometer-long Philadelphia corridor. He called Israel's control of the corridor vital to ensuring Hamas does not remain and does not rearm via tunnels.
This corridor is different from other corridors, from other places. It is central. It determines our entire future. Its importance to us is great, but the world wants the war to end. The last thing it wants is for us to enter it, and immense pressure will be put on us.
Netanyahu also expresses shock at U.S. President Joe Biden's comment that he was not doing enough to reach a ceasefire for hostage deal.
They murdered 6 of our hostages in cold blood. So, after this horrible murder, I don't believe that someone would come. Someone serious would come and say, now make more concessions, you are not serious, Hamas is serious. I can't believe that this happened. I can't believe anyone really thinks that. And I can't believe that President Biden actually said that.
Meanwhile, Hamas's armed wing has warned that Netanyahu's reliance on Israeli military raids in Gaza instead of a truce deal means more captives will be returned to their families in coffins.
Deal now chants reverberated in Israel as tens of thousands of demonstrators poured into streets in grief and anger in what appeared to be the largest protest since the start of the war 11 months ago.
In Jerusalem, demonstrators gathered outside Netanyahu's private home with posters of the 6 hostages and makeshift coffins draped in the Israeli flag. A scuffle broke out when police snatched them away.
Now, the United States has seized Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro's plane in the Dominican Republic and flew it to Florida,
alleging that its purchase violated U.S. sanctions. According to U.S. Justice Department, the aircraft was illegally purchased for $13 million through a Caribbean-based shell company and smuggled out of the United States. The United States says that in late 2022 and early 2023, individuals linked to Maduro allegedly used the shell company to conceal their involvement in the illegal purchase of the jet.
The seized private jet, the Dassault Falcon 900EX, was used by Maduro and members of his government. The foreign ministry in Caracas issued a statement denouncing the seizure as piracy.
Meanwhile, the Dominican Republic made it clear that it did not participate in the U.S. probe. The seizure of the aircraft came amid continuing pressure on Maduro at home and abroad over a contested election that he claimed to have won, while the opposition said its vote tallies showed its candidates soundly defeated him.
President Nicolas Maduro, his associates, and Venezuela's oil sector are under heavy U.S. sanctions, and his handling of the election has raised the prospects that further measures could be imposed. Meanwhile, a Venezuelan court has granted an arrest warrant for opposition presidential candidate Edmundo Gonzalez, who claims to have won July elections.
The prosecutor's office said that the court granted its request for a warrant against Gonzalez in connection with serious crimes. Earlier, the office published its request to the court on social media, listing the alleged crimes that stem from the opposition's insistence that Maduro and his allies stole the July 28th presidential vote. All right, let's shift our focus now. President Vladimir Putin claims that Russia is rapidly gaining ground in eastern Ukraine.
Now, this as the situation on the Eastern Front continues to deteriorate for Ukraine. Kiev has rushed its best troops and more firepower to defend Pokrovsk, where Russian troops are piling pressure. The big question, has Ukraine's cursed offensive backfired? Our next story tells you more.
Ukraine is feeling the heat. Its audacious attack in Kursk isn't working out as planned. Russian forces are instead pushing ahead with greater ferocity. In a desperate attempt, Ukraine launched over 150 drones into Russian territory. Its biggest drone attack on Russia so far targeted power plants and an oil refinery. This is Belgorod in Russia, a heavily damaged kindergarten, burnt cars, damaged buildings. The Russian response was swift and devastating. Kyiv says missiles struck a shopping mall and an events complex in the northeastern city of Kharkiv. Dozens of people, including children, were injured. This is the moment a missile landed on Kharkiv. A little further away on the eastern front lines lies the real problem for President Zelensky, where Russian forces using heavy artillery and the devastating glide bombs are seeking to break through Ukrainian defense lines.
Now, it's not about advancing 200 or 300 meters forward. We didn't have such rates of advance in Donbass for a long time. The Russian armed forces reclaim under their control not 200 or 300 square meters of territories, but square kilometers.
Pokrovsk, once home to 80,000 people, is steadily emptying out and shutting down as Russians close in. Pokrovsk lies on the intersection of a key road that supplies Ukrainian troops and towns across the Eastern Front and has long been a target for the Russian army. On the 6th of August, Ukraine made the audacious incursion into Russia's Kursk region, looking to divert Moscow's forces away from eastern Ukraine. All it has achieved so far is making Russia double down on its push to seize more territory in eastern Ukraine. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
In another incident of gun-related violence in the United States, 4 passengers were shot dead inside a commuter train in Chicago.
This incident took place in the early hours of Labor Day at the Forest Park subway station. The police received a call of the shooting saying 3 people were shot on a train. As the authorities arrived on the scene, they found 4 victims, with 3 pronounced dead on the scene. The 4th victim was taken to a local medical facility and was later declared dead. Following this, police officers got their hands on the surveillance footage, which revealed the suspect fleeing the scene. Authorities said that the suspect was arrested on a different train route and a gun was recovered as well. Forest Park Police Department said that no information was available on the victims' names, age and gender.
It's a horrible situation. It's definitely something that you don't want to wake up to. It's a Monday morning on a holiday. Everyone's supposed to be, enjoying their time off, time with their families. It's Labor Day, so to actually have to be here, to address a situation like this, it's, horrible.
Meanwhile, the Chicago Transit Authority, or the CTA, issued a statement that said that the heinous crime should have never happened on a public transit train. Train services were temporarily disrupted owing to the shooting incident.
Well, with that, it's time now for a short break.
But don't go anywhere. On the other side of World DNA, weeks after a horrific rape and murder of a trainee doctor in Kolkata's RGCG Medical College and Hospital, India's Central Bureau of Investigation has arrested the ex-principal Sandeep Ghosh.
Senior Congress leader Pawan Khera has raised concerns about Sebi chairperson Madhvi Puri Butchu's financial ties with the ICICI Bank now. Stay tuned for that.
Namaste. Hello friends. We did Dr. Subhash Chandra show, popularly known as DSC show, for 4 years, from August 2014 to August 2018. 28 states of Bharat. Of course, we reached out to all of you in 190 countries across the world. The show was very successful. Each episode was being watched by almost 25 million people every week. For past 6 years, the demand of the show has never died down. People write to us, people ask for the show to restart again. Hence, we are beginning the show once again on All Z Network, also on WION, which is the global network channel from India. Again, thank you for your love and affection. See you soon at Subhash Chandra Show.
To bring the benefits of the Subhash Chandra Show to your educational institution, teachers and students, send an invitation to Juhi Jha at yoursarthi@such.org.in.
WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide, because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION. World is one.
Welcome back. You're watching World DNA with me, Jyotsna Kumar, and my colleague Him Karsoria. Let's start with the headlines first.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israeli forces must retain control over the Philadelphia corridor on the Gaza-Egypt border, vows not to give in to pressure over the issue in ceasefire talks.
Thousands march across Israel for a third straight day to demand an immediate hostage release deal after bodies of 6 hostages recovered from Gaza.
UK suspends some export licenses to Israel for arms used in military operations in Gaza. Government review finds possible breach of international humanitarian law.
Turkey arrests 15 members of a radical nationalist youth movement accused of assaulting 2 U.S. military personnel in the western city of Izmir.
Indian investigators arrest Sandeep Ghosh, ex-principal of Kolkata's RGCG Medical College and Hospital, weeks after the horrific rape and murder of a trainee doctor. 3 more arrested in cases related to financial irregularities at the hospital.
Venezuela's Attorney General issues arrest warrant for opposition leader Edmundo Gonzalez, accuses him of incitement and other crimes amid dispute over presidential election results.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to embark on a 3-day visit to Brunei and Singapore today, the first ever bilateral visit by an Indian Prime Minister to Brunei.
Brazilian Supreme Court panel unanimously upholds nationwide suspension of social media platform X. Judges vote to extend blocking of the Elon Musk-owned platform.
"39-year-old Cristiano Ronaldo refutes international retirement talks. The Portugal captain says that the thought of hanging the boots never crossed his mind.
Right, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi will depart on his official visits to Brunei and Singapore today.
In the first leg of his trip, Prime Minister Modi is visiting Brunei at the invitation of Sultan Haji Hassan Al Bolkiah to strengthen bilateral cooperation between the two countries.
Prime Minister Modi's visit, which is the first bilateral trip by an Indian Prime Minister to Brunei, marks 40 years of the establishment of diplomatic relations between India and the country. Prime Minister Modi's 2 days visit to the country will focus on enhancing trade ties and bolstering cooperation in the space and defense sectors.
India has multiple agreements with Brunei in defense, energy, space, technology and health sectors. India imports $270 million worth of crude oil from Brunei as well.
Brunei is an important partner for India's Act East policy. There are around 14,500 Indians living in the country, comprising a substantial number of doctors and teachers in the country.
After Brunei, Prime Minister Modi will visit Singapore on the 4th of September. He is visiting the country after nearly 6 years at the invitation of the Singaporean counterpart, Lawrence Wong.
In his 2 days visit, Prime Minister Modi will meet Singapore President Tharman Nam and Prime Minister Lawrence Wong. He will also interact with Singaporean leadership and business leaders. India and Singapore are set to sign a significant agreement on semiconductors during Prime Minister Modi's visit.
And India's Sebi chief is under a new regulatory storm. Senior Congress leader Pawan Khera raised concerns about Sebi chairperson Madhvi Puri Butch's financial ties with ICICI Bank.
While the bank has denied paying any salary or stock options, these new allegations add to the growing scrutiny on India's markets regulator following Hindenburg's accusations. According to Congress, Butch has received 16.80 crore rupees from ICICI Bank, ICICI Prudential and ESOPs since her appointment. Butch's income includes regular payments from ICICI Bank between 2017 and 2024, TDS on ESOPs, covered by the bank, and 2.17 lakh rupees from ICICI Prudential for the 2021-2022 fiscal year. Her salary reportedly increased from over 2 crore rupees in 2017-18 to 4.71 crore in the following year. Despite income from ICICI Bank ceasing, payments from ICICI Prudential and ESOPs continued.
The controversy extends to Sebi's role in the ICICI Securities merger. The merger involves ICICI Bank acquiring securities, a transaction complicated by regulatory issues. Sebi approved a waiver of its usual rules for this merger, which has led to legal challenges.
Critics argue that the standard price discovery process was bypassed, impacting minority investors. A class action suit claims that merger terms resulted in significant financial losses for investors. Sebi's approval of this waiver and the associated process are under intense scrutiny.
The ongoing scrutiny includes allegations from Hindenburg Research about Sebi chair Butch's past investments and her role in overseeing the Adani Group investigation. Butch has dismissed these claims as character assassination, maintaining that she adhered to all required disclosures and recusals. The Sebi's decision to exempt ICICI Securities from a detailed price discovery process, it's further raised questions about regulatory fairness and transparency. The Bombay High Court has directed Sebi to disclose its approval letter for the merger.
Weeks after horrific rape and murder of a trainee doctor in Kolkata's RGCG Medical College and Hospital, India's Central Bureau of Investigation has arrested the ex-principal Sandeep Ghosh.
This probe agency arrested Ghosh on accusations of financial irregularities at the hospital during his tenure. Prior to the arrest, the CBI questioned Ghosh for 15 hours. On the 25th of August, the investigative body had carried out a search at Ghosh's residence in Kolkata as part of its probe into the corruption cases.
The CBI also arrested two vendors, Biplav Singha and Suman Hazara, in additional security to Ghosh, Afsar Ali in the case. The Enforcement Directorate is also carrying out an investigation of its own. ED has filed a money laundering case to probe alleged financial misconduct at the hospital during Ghosh's tenure. Sandeep Ghosh has stepped down. He had stepped down 3 days after the incident of rape and murder came to light on August 9th.
Meanwhile, protests continue to rage in the state of West Bengal and other parts of the country as thousands demand justice for the 32-year-old and better security laws for healthcare professionals. All right, here's riddle. What was big in the 1990s collapsed in the late 2000s but surged, and it staged a surprise resurgence after many years of absence? Interest rates.
Absolutely. Now, central banks are looking back to the 1990s as they face the question of how far and fast rates need to fall. And not everyone is reaching the same conclusion. Take a look at our next report.
In Jackson Hole, global central banks set 3 potential paths for persistent inflation, all of which imply very different paths for interest rates over the next couple of years. First, would inflation simply fall away of its own accord, without any economic damage? Second, would it take more pain in the jobs market to get inflation consistently back to target? Or finally, do we now live in a world where pricing behavior has changed for good and wage bargaining power has increased? That would imply it will be much harder to get inflation down permanently and rates may barely fall at all. Listening to Fed Chair Jerome Powell, it sounds like he is very much in the first camp. Revealingly, he said that he does not welcome any further weakening in the jobs market.
The time has come for policy to adjust. The direction of travel is clear, and the timing and pace of rate cuts will depend on incoming data, the evolving outlook, and the balance of risks.
It sounds like he has become much more open to kicking off the easing cycle with a 50 basis point cut in September, even if some of his colleagues appear less convinced. Over in Europe, policymakers are still making their mind up. Any notion of policy divergence, however, will be short-lived. Rates are headed to a similar destination, lower in most developed economies. If that comes to pass, then the Fed should be pretty chuffed. The 1995 rate-cutting cycle, much like the one in 2019, was a rare example of a central bank nudging rates back to a more neutral level without any major hiccups. Of course, it's more common that rate cuts are started by the wheels falling off the bus. And the added challenge today is that widespread fixed-rate lending means it takes longer for interest rate cuts to hit the economy. The US jobs report this week is the clear focus after recent weakness and downward revisions to payrolls. If we get a sub 100,000 on payrolls and the unemployment rate ticks up to 4.4% or even 4.5%, then 50 basis point cut looks likely given Powell's comment that we don't seek or welcome further cooling in labour market conditions. However, if payrolls come in around the 150,000 mark and the unemployment rate stays at 4.3% or dips to 4.2%, we can safely say it will be a 25 basis point cut. Those figures will give a clue as to whether we're entering this more precarious scenario. And if we are, then there is a real risk central banks have left it too late to start cutting rates. If they have, then we will have someone other than Taylor Swift to blame for inflation forecasts next summer. Business Bureau Report. WION World is One.
All right, let's now take a look at the intensifying trade war between China and Japan.
The United States-led efforts to isolate China from cutting-edge technology have been obstructed by Beijing's warning of harsh economic retaliation against Japan. And this comes after news that Tokyo will tighten its restrictions on sales and services of chip-making equipment to Chinese firms.
A Bloomberg report quoting sources showed Chinese officials pressured Japan not to align with Biden's push for Tokyo to align with new U.S. rules. Toyota Motor expressed concern to Tokyo officials that China would restrict Japan's access to vital minerals needed for a car manufacturer. A Bloomberg source said that Toyota, one of Japan's most important businesses, is heavily involved in the country's chip policy. Japanese policymakers will give serious thought to Toyota's problems. Tokyo Electron, a semiconductor gear manufacturer, is also likely to be impacted by any additional export restrictions imposed by Japan.
To limit China's advancements in semiconductor technology, the United States has been exerting pressure on Japan to limit the supply of sophisticated chip-making machines to China. Senior U.S. officials and their Japanese counterparts have been meeting to figure out how to keep crucial mineral supplies stable, especially as China imposed export limits on gallium, germanium and graphite last year.
There are some precedents in history for Toyota's worries following a confrontation in the East China Sea in 2010, with both Japan and China claim Beijing briefly halted rare earth supplies to Japan. This move rocked Japan's electronics industry and cut off the world's supply of high-power magnets made in Japan using rare earth imported from China. Since then, Tokyo's efforts to lower its dependency on rare earth imports from China have met with limited success. The Chinese Foreign Ministry warned in a statement that it opposes efforts by any individual nation to politicize normal trade and lure other countries to join any technology blockade against China.
All right, here's a look at developments from the world of technology now. According to reports, China has threatened significant economic retaliation against Japan if it further limits the sale and servicing of chip-making equipment to Chinese companies. Toyota, which is a major Japanese automaker, it's reportedly informed Japanese officials that Beijing might respond to these restrictions by cutting off Japan's access to essential minerals, which are needed for automotive manufacturing. China's foreign ministry has expressed strong opposition to what it calls the artificial disruption of global supply chains, the politicization of economic and trade relations, and technological blockades against China. In July, Japan began restricting exports of 23 types of semiconductor manufacturing equipment, aligning with US efforts to limit China's ability to produce advanced chips.
Brazilians are pushing back against the ban on the social media platform X. This has led to a sharp increase in the use of virtual private networks, or VPNs, despite the risk of facing fines of up to $9,000 per day for bypassing restrictions. The ban on X was imposed on Friday as tensions between Elon Musk and Brazilian Supreme Court Justice Alexandre de Moraes intensified over issues of content moderation and freedom of speech. Despite these potential fines, VPN usage in Brazil has reportedly surged up by 1,600%. A VPN protects its users by encrypting their data and masking their IP addresses. Brazilian users of X have reportedly said that without X, they feel disconnected from the rest of the world. Additionally, alternatives to X, such as Blue Sky and Meta's Threads, have also reported an increase in new users on their platforms.
A 72-year-old woman from the Indian state of Kerala fell for an online scam that cost her $85,000. The woman reportedly received a call from an individual pretending to be an official from the Reserve Bank of India. The scammer falsely claimed that her credit card had been blocked for security reasons. While trying to unblock her card, the scammer stole around $85,000 from her bank account. Similar to other cases where people were targeted by fake officers and kept in digital arrest, the elderly woman was also tricked into staying online, effectively placing her in virtual arrest. Cybersecurity experts have emphasized that legitimate institutions like the Reserve Bank of India or the Central Bureau of Investigation will never ask for sensitive information over the phone.
All right, this one's for the science enthusiast. The silent emptiness of space was pierced by a strange, repetitive noise that echoed through the Starliner spacecraft. Noise so bizarre that it immediately caught the attention of the astronauts aboard the ISS.
Now, the eerie sound was heard coming from within the capsule, leaving many wondering if it could be an alien signal or something else entirely. Here's a report. Take a look.
I am a part of the universe.
Space, the final frontier, a realm filled with the unknown, an infinite expanse where mysteries abound and anything seems possible. It is in this vast, enigmatic void that a new unsettling puzzle has emerged. Could it be some unknown space anomaly, or perhaps something more? Astronauts aboard the International Space Station have reported hearing mysterious sounds. NASA astronaut Butch Wilmore, alarmed at the strange noises from a speaker inside the Starliner spacecraft, dialed NASA's flight controllers in Houston.
There's a strange noise coming through the speaker, and I didn't know if you could connect into the Starliner and let me keep mic and let you hear it. I don't know what's making it, but I don't know if it's something that maybe is connected between here and there, making that happen. But anyway, can you do that?
Mission Control, equally perplexed, confirmed the eerie, rhythmic noise, promising the astronaut to get back. The unexplained noises have sparked a frenzy of speculation online, with some suggesting supernatural explanations or drawing comparisons to science fiction scenarios. However, experts have proposed more grounded theories, such as electromagnetic interference or audio system feedback. This latest development adds to the growing list of anomalies associated with the Starliner mission. The spacecraft, originally intended for a brief 8-day stay, has been delayed due to a series of technical setbacks, including thruster failures and helium leaks. Astronaut Butch Wilmore stranded on the ISS alongside Sunita Williams as NASA engineers raced to identify the source of these mysterious sounds. The incident serves as a stark reminder of the unpredictable nature of space exploration. The harsh environment beyond Earth's atmosphere can present unexpected challenges, even for the most advanced technology. Bureau Report, WION World is One.